I think what President Trump wants, he wants several things. One is he wants to end the fentanyl crisis in the United States. I respect that. He wants good, high-paying jobs in America. He wants more investment in America. He wants repatriation of many American industries and firms to the United States. So, and I fully respect that. I think he will respect that as Prime Minister of Canada, I want to end the fentanyl crisis in Canada. I want to grow good, high-paying jobs in Canada. And of course, I want to protect with my colleagues and reaffirm and reinforce our sovereignty.
Prime Minister Mark Carney there responding to a question about whether his Donald Trump strategy is deliberately different than his predecessors, Justin Trudeau. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford, meanwhile, fresh off a meeting with Trump's Commerce Secretary last week, insists tariffs are most certainly coming.
We told the administration very clearly how we feel these tariffs are going to hurt the American people. Yes, it's going to hurt Canada, but it's going to hurt the American people. Mark my words, on April the 2nd, markets will continue to tumble. They were down over $4 trillion. Consumer confidence is down right now. Investments are down. Inflation is happening.
So is a pivot in approach to Trump smart or futile if those tariffs are coming no matter what? The front bench is back. Brian Gallant, James Moore, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Tom, I'll start with you in fully acknowledging it. We're obviously days away likely from an election call. But I thought the question from the New York Times reporter was really smart today in sort of assessing that the language that Mr. Carney has used over the past few days has been different than what we heard from former Prime Minister Trudeau. How deliberate do you think that is, and do you think it will actually lead to a reset of sorts? I don't even know if that's possible, but maybe.
Well, we often make a lot of Mr. Carney's background running the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. And in that world, every single word that is uttered by the governor is weighed, because you don't want to cause a run on the markets, and you don't want to cause a result that's undesirable, or you do want to give the probable warning of something that's over the horizon. So he's very, despite the previous topic and the responses to some questions yesterday, Mark Carney is a seasoned pro when it comes to trying to use the right tone and dealing with Trump. I believe he's taken an approach that probably comes to him after his discussions with Macron and Starmer, amongst others, and saying, look, take that approach, because it doesn't matter who you're talking to in his administration. They're always going to kowtow to Trump. They're always going to repeat his lines, but you're still going to be able to talk to them about the real stuff and try to find the right way to do an end run. So I think that what Carney's trying to do right now is smart. I know that Canadians loved when Doug Ford stood up and said he was going to give them a punch in the nose, and that got great applause. But even he came back from his meeting, with the highest level of the American administration saying, okay, it's going to be okay. We've had a good talk. It was a great meeting, and he was able to move on from there. His warning about April 2nd, I think, is the exact right thing for him to do, Doug Ford. It'll come right in the middle of this likely election campaign, and it could cause havoc, but we're going to see whether or not he is wise to use a more sober tone in dealing with Trump. In my estimation, it is the wise thing to do.
I was talking to someone, James, in reference to Doug Ford and the federal government, saying that Doug Ford would likely assume a more bad cop role going forward, but was okay with, being able to defer to the federal government, which he didn't feel he was necessarily able to do while the former prime minister was on his way out. Do you think ultimately that might be a successful combination?
Could well be. We'll see in the fullness of time as President Trump changes his substance and style on a day-to-day basis. But I think my broad strokes is I think what Canadians want to see from their prime minister is someone who is tough, who's very firm, but also who's reasonable and temperamentally dispassionate about this. You look at the playing field that's behind Donald Trump. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. I mean, person after person after person who tried to get in the ring with him and dance and try to outshout him. It's just not going to work. And I just think that in the long term, not responding to everything, don't react, only respond, be measured, be thoughtful, be substantive, be firm and clear. I think that's what Canadians want. Pierre Poilievre has clearly shifted his tone in that regard with regard to Donald Trump. I think Mark Carney is doubling down on that, because I think we now have some market research. We see how Ireland is being treated versus how President Zelensky was treated. We see how different people sort of evoke different reactions. And I just think that being judicious and temperamental, but being tough and firm on behalf of Canadians is kind of the sweet spot of where we need to be. We will adjust our tactics as necessary, rhetorically and substantively. But I think that's sort of what the market is telling us is the correct place to be at this time.
Rob, what are your thoughts on that? And do you think it's true? I mean, we haven't seen huge amounts of it yet, but in every scrum, and there have been a few of them now, or press conference that Mark Carney has held, he certainly, like I notice, will respond to questions about Trump in a different way than we might have been used to.
I think there's been a tone change. I mean, have we seen a tweet from the President of the United States calling him Governor Carney, even though I guess technically he was a governor, he actually was a governor of the Bank of England, governor of the Bank of Canada. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen as much talk about the 51st state. Doug Ford said today at Queen's Park that Howard Lutnick, basically said, let's tone things down a little bit, and they have toned down. Lutnick hasn't been as incendiary in his TV interviews, if he's done any, since that meeting Thursday with Dominic LeBlanc, François-Philippe Champagne, and Mr. Ford and Jameson Greer, the U.S. trade representative in Washington. So that meeting, basically, the Americans said tariffs are coming, and we're not going to blink. But there may be in the weeks and months after that some changes. And I think in that meeting, Lutnick and others said that Justin Trudeau was a problem. The personal enmity that the president felt toward the former prime minister was a factor. And I think the fact that Mr. Carney is now there, a change is as good as a rest in terms of U.S.-Canada relations. We're still going to have these tariffs. We're still going to have a recession, unfortunately, probably, because of Mr. Trump's tariffs. But at least the name-calling maybe have dissipated somewhat.
Will the imposition of tariffs versus the threat of them, Brian, you think make a difference in the approach this country ends up taking?
Well, let me just start off by saying I agree with everything that Tom, James, and Rob said. I think you
could just stop talking now.
I'm not going to add much value now because I agree with everything they said. To Rob's point, I just have to say, though, what an alternate universe we would have been had Freeland won the leadership and would be prime minister when obviously it's being shared by the administration that Trudeau was a problem. I think it's well documented and well known that Freeland was seen as a bit of a problem. She wore that as a badge of honor, but nevertheless, we'd be in a different universe today. I think the approach has been exactly as James kind of laid out and Tom laid out in terms of the demeanor that Prime Minister Carney's used to and just, I think, his personality. In terms of whether the tariffs being implemented would have changed the approach. Look, I think James said it well in the sense that we got to be a little nimble here and prepared to change our approach as the facts sort of morph and change. So let's expect that. But nevertheless, the idea of being somewhat respectful. Just respectful, I should say, but in obviously a firm way, as James, paraphrasing him, said, I think will probably withstand the next few weeks, even if more tariffs are put on or if they're solidified after April 2nd. I also think the tone has changed, but at the same time, in parallel, he's talking about drastic measures like looking at the F-35 deal, right? So again, showing respect, but at the same time, firmness. So I do think that's where Canadians want to be. The only thing that I would add to this whole dialogue is we didn't really touch upon outgoing Prime Minister Trudeau at the time, certainly had nothing to lose, told himself that I just don't agree with this person. I'm sure he's calculating history will show that he is wrong, so I'm going to put my mark right now on where I stand in this moment, and given I'm not going to have to defend that for the next few months, few years, whatever the case will be after the next would have been after the next election, he just kind of let it rip. And I think he said, frankly, a lot of things Canadians were feeling, but I don't think, as everybody had mentioned, we necessarily want to put too much emotion right now. We want to be very sort of fact-driven. We want to be firm and respectful to see if that approach works, and again, be nimble if it doesn't.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the discussion. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, James Moore, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie.